Good evening. Welcome to today's meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee. I'm Councillor Tom Marino, the chairman of the committee. Before we start, I'd like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that today's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present and COVID compliant in the council chamber. I can confirm that those present in the chamber are sitting socially distanced and are thus permitted to remove their face masks while seated. In addition to myself, the other members of the committee in attendance are councillors Jeremy Cottam, Vice Chairman, Adrian Abbs, Rick Jones, Tony Linden, Jeff Mays and Claire Rolls. We also have Parish Council representatives on the committee, councillors Bill Graham from Shoreham-Donington Parish Council and David Southgate from Bucklebury Parish Council. Parish councillors are permitted to speak at the meeting, but they are not permitted to vote on the items. Joseph Holmes, Sarah Clark, Maura Fraser and Julie Gillespie are the officers who will be advising the meeting. Jack Creamy is the clerk to the meeting and Stephen Charge is the Zoom host. Do members have any questions about the way in which the meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Okay, great. So we'll move on to item 1, apologies. Jack, have we got any apologies?
Yes, Councillor Andy Moore is sending apologies. Adrian Abbs is here as a substitute, as well as apologies from Councillor Jeff Beck and David Marsh.
Great, thank you, Jack. So item 2, the minutes. Members, are you willing to accept the minutes of the previous meeting as a true and accurate record? Councillor Rolls?
Yeah, I've just got one amendment, Chairman. I did attend that meeting, but there's no note of me being present.
Okay, Councillor Linden?
Yes, Chairman, I've got a few things on the minutes. One is on, well, 2 of them are on page 4, and it's for Joseph Holmes. I asked a question about the suburban population of Reading West and also the date of the creation of the Unitary Council.
Okay, so can we make a note of those additions and make those changes? So members of...
No, I asked for some information, so I was just waiting for it, Jim.
Okay, yeah, Joseph, do you want to take that now or do you want to come back to Councillor Linden after?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have raised it with the officer concerned, and we're picking up for the final set of financial statements, which will come through to the committee for approval once external audit have finished their audit.
So, and you'll let me know as well, that'll be fine. Okay. And Chairman, there was one thing on page 5 that didn't make sense. It's stated on the second paragraph, Councillor Linden stated the Berkshire Pension Fund has been late, but it would be improved to allow for better reporting. But that it would be improved to allow for better reporting on what I believe I said was the matter has been sorted out and will be on time on future in terms of the pension fund reports, because there has been a delay on that. So I'd like a change in the minutes for that because it doesn't really make sense.
Does anyone want to address that now? We're just happy to make a note and have that changed going forward. Sarah, I thought you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, just to confirm, I've seen that Councillor Rolls was noted as being in attendance under also present, and I think that might be because Councillor Rolls was attending virtually, and that might be something for us to just, you were in the chamber. Okay, so we just need to have that amended so that it's in the right place.
Yeah, I think that's what my confusion was. I was looking for it under councillors present and I was here in the chamber. Thank you.
So, Chairman, that will be corrected in terms of the minutes.
Yeah, we can have those corrections made. You're referring to the ones that you talked about on, page 5, etc.
On page 5 about the pension fund, yes.
Yeah, we're happy to have those.
So if it will be for members, if members agree that those amendments need to be made, then they will be made or recorded in the next set of minutes to make those corrections.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Rolls.
Yeah, can I just make a suggestion from the sort of perception from the public? It's actually quite hard to know where people have attended virtually or not. And I think it would be really good if we could have an accurate record where councillors present in the chamber, also councillors present virtually, and then also the officers in the same vein, just for absolute clarity.
Okay, Councillor Cottam, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was just going to propose it within the inclusion of the corrections or modifications.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Linden. So please can members indicate by raising their hand if they agree.
Sorry,
Sarah.
if Councillor Cottam shouldn't be proposing because he's not in the
No,
council chamber.
true.
So I need
Apologies.
Thank you.
Not really there. I'm not really here.
Okay, so yeah, Councillor Linden's going to propose. We have another seconder in the room for that.
I'm happy to second based on the amendments that are going to be made.
Yeah,
Thank
on
you.
the basis of the amendments, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so please can members in the room indicate by raising their hand if they agree that the members can be the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record. Okay, great. So those minutes have been approved as a true and accurate record. I'll sign them in a second. Oh, sorry, Councillor I was just abstaining from that, assuming as you weren't present.
I wasn't present.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll sign those as a true and accurate record. Okay, great. So move on to item 3, declarations of interest. Jack, have we had any declarations of interest?
We've not received any to date.
Are there any from the floor? Can't see any virtually or in the room. So we'll move forward to item 4, the forward plan. So officers and members, are there any amendments that you'd like made to the forward plan? So Sarah first.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Andy Moore, who is a member of the Constitution Review Task Group, had noted that we are proposing to bring a number of amendments through to Council in December, which means that there will need to be an item for the Constitution, proposed amendments to the Constitution at the 15th of November G&E, so that will need to be added.
Okay, fine, thank you. Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chair. That was my point actually about the Constitution Review. I also have another question. If a member wants to bring something to governance and ethics, would that just be sort of put on the forward plan depending on the nature of the agenda item that they want to raise? In short, so I have one that I'd like to put on, but shall I email you separately on that?
Is it Sarah, can you take that?
Yeah, it will depend what it is. So if you want to email either the chairman or I'm happy if you want to email me, then we can advise as to the rest.
Okay,
or the correct route. Right.
So under the Constitution, I can refer it to governance and ethics. So I'll email you guys and then it'll get placed on the forward plan at some stage, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's really the influenza plan that G&E normally discusses, I think February, March timeframe each year. Given we are not out of COVID, would it not be advisable to bring that forward to the next meeting so that we can review our readiness? Because the influenza plan 2 years ago, when we were having that meeting, was when we first raised that there might be a pandemic coming and there might be blah, blah, blah. So if it's not ever discussed anymore, because I don't come to all the G&E meetings, apologies, but that one was important to me back then and remains important to me. So.
Someone will take that.
I think it was discussed as part of the council's risk register, if I recall correctly. So there wasn't an item specifically to deal with the pandemic or kind of the influenza, and the strategic risk register is on the forward plan, and they are scheduled to come, I think, twice a year. The updates are brought to the committee.
Thank you, Sarah. The only thing, Chairman, I would say is I think it's important, given what's happening, that we review it ahead of or before the season's really kicked in, because we're at the beginning of that influenza season, the COVID season, as we're now going to call it, I suppose.
Yeah. Councillor Jones, yeah.
I agree with Councillor Adds in terms of its importance, but I suggest that the right forum to discuss it would be connected to the Health and Wellbeing Board or the Outbreak Board, because they are much closer to the action, and they meet on a very regular basis.
Yeah, I saw your hand, Councillor Rolls. Was that in response to that?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was, thank you, Chair. I was going to agree with that. And I believe off the top of my head, OSMC were looking at COVID and the sort of scrutinising that, and also that there may be some fallout of that onto the health scrutiny to be picked up in that forum. So perhaps that's the most appropriate way. But I totally agree. I think we should definitely include it on a forward plan. I have another point, if that's all right.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I appreciate that we are largely governed by routine things such as the audit, such as appointment of external advisors, etc. But I just looked at our forward plan and slightly felt it was a little unambitious in terms of looking for things outside of the routine stuff. And maybe it's I'm still relatively new member, as in my first term on the council, but it was sort of pretty uninspiring. Sorry to say that. I mean, I'm not saying these things are uninspiring, but that I thought we should be looking for other things that we should be covering on this committee outside routine health checks of internal audit, etc. And I'm not being derogatory at all around what we're covering, but I felt it was largely unambitious.
Yeah, that's fine. Judy, do you want to come back to that? I'm assuming that's what the hand's up for.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't know if you can remember the reports that I've put through committee about the effectiveness of the Governance and Ethics Committee and the recommendations. And a couple of those were about the remit of the committee and having a review of the work plan, reviewing with what you've achieved for the year, and also setting a plan in place for future years. And it shouldn't be just officer driven. So the report that we're mentioning was sort of officers are putting forward what goes in the forward plan, but there are other areas where the committee can be more proactive. So we have made that recommendation. And there's some of those recommendations that are coming back to committee later this year or early next year. And as part of that, hopefully there'll be some more engagement about what should go on the forward plan. Yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Judy. That's really helpful. And I think there needs to be more coming through from members. I think that was the point, which is good that it dovetails in with your recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Linden.
Yes, I'm on audit on the Fire Authority, I'm Vice Chairman. We do discuss things like, for instance, the budget and difficulties as well on a general basis. But there again, that's on a committee structure rather than a leader and executive, just as an idea. I mean, there are other things on the agenda, but maybe when I get the agenda, I can have a chat with you, Chairman, and we'll see that what we might be missing as such. But
Okay.
There is a different constitutional area. So I just thought I'd mention it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Julie, is that an old hand, or do you want to come back in? Okay, that's fine. I can't see any more hands in the room or virtually. I think the forward plan is just being noted, isn't it, Sarah? Obviously, with those comments, obviously taking those comments on board from members, but I think we are just noting the forward plan. Move on. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Abs.
Sorry, we haven't had a few minutes to think about the responses from the other members, which I don't disagree with it at all, really, in that all the committees they mention are great places to look at the COVID plan, the influenza plan in detail. My understanding, one of the functions of governance and ethics is to be able to audit, to provide oversight. I mean, if I look at the forward plan here, it's audit. So are we not therefore a good body to audit the plans that are created in detail in these other committees? Who's marking the schoolwork, basically?
So OSMC will scrutinise. So it is. I think it's potentially apples and pears, but I think and that piece of work, as Councillor Walls has said, has already been identified. And I think the COVID response is due to come to an upcoming meeting. And as Councillor Walls has indicated, there may be further work that will come out of that, which could include doing forward work on future years' plans.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just to respond to that slightly, COVID is the current pandemic, and you just have to look at the bit of the media. It's just the current situation we're in, and there's lots more coming down the road. So getting ready for any type of pandemic, influenza, about whatever, is where my head was at. But thank you.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Ross.
Sorry, just very briefly, because I'm conscious we probably want to move on. But I think it depends on the remit of what aspect of governance and ethics falls within that. I mean, OSMC scrutinises more widely. Our terms of reference are particularly limited to governance and ethics issues. That's my understanding. So I'm not sure what governance and ethics type things would fall out of that. So maybe if that is the case, then OSMC would refer it back to us.
I don't know if someone wants to respond to that or.
No, just to say, I think Councillor Rolls and I are on the same place. I think it is a scrutiny function rather than a kind of governance and ethics type function.
Happy to accept that, Chairman.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And audit.
So I can't see any more hands in the room or in the or on Zoom. So we'll note that and we'll move on to item 5, which is the internal audit interim report for quarter 1, 2021-2022. I think Julie's going to be introducing that for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Evening. So this is my report, my quarterly report covering the first quarter of this year. And the key points to note really are in section 4.5, where I've mentioned there are no significant issues that I need to notify the committee of for this reporting period for the work that we've completed. And to support that, if you go into section 5.2 underneath the table, so we're given the opinions of the work that's been completed, and from there, there's no corporate audits with a less than satisfactory opinion. There was one school that was given a weak opinion, and I'm saying the main reasons for that were the need to strengthen the income processes. So besides that, there's nothing of concern or during the period. And attached to the report are the usual appendices. Appendix A gives the completed work and the opinions. Appendix B is work in progress. And Appendix C is the anti-fraud work plan and progress. So that's the highlight really of the report, and it's whether there's any questions.
Okay, well, I saw Councillor Cotham's hand go up first.
Thank you very much, Chair. Does it include the iCollege, or is that coming up later?
That is the iCollege. The week audit report is the iCollege. Because
that was, well, what did you say it was designated? I thought it was 4 rather than.
We've given it the opinion of week, yeah.
I mean, so it is of concern if it's weak.
There are areas, it's not very weak, so it's not of significant concern, but it's weak as in there are quite a number of areas that need improvement. The key ones we've mentioned are the income collection and recording processes.
Okay, so just recording financial transactions.
No, the iCollege raises quite a lot of invoices, which is different from other schools, though quite a large income collection, and we just thought they could be more robust. So that's why it's the weak opinion, because those areas need improving. We will be doing a follow-up 6 months.
So there are actions being taken?
Yes, we follow it up.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, I've got Councillor Rolls next.
Thanks, Chair. Quick question, Julie. Thanks for the report. I just wondered where you have satisfactory sort of outcome, overall opinion, do you make recommendations to those organisations, those schools, to move towards well controlled?
Yes, we do. The aim is to have something that's well controlled, or that we're very comfortable with the control framework. A satisfactory opinion is where if they don't do anything, it's reasonable, it's okay, we haven't got any issues of concern, but we do think there are areas that could be improved. At the end of the day, we can only make recommendations. That the satisfactory is the benchmark. Below that, we'd have concerns. Satisfactory is if they don't do anything, we're not concerned, but there are areas where they can improve on. So that, yes, there's still recommendations, but there's less of them and they're not significant.
Okay, I've got Councillor Abbs.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick check, really. Obviously, we're in September and this is a Q1 reports. Normally reports are for the previous quarter, or are we normally accepting a 2-quarter kind of delay between on what we're auditing? Is it, or simply the lack of G&E meetings that causes this?
It's this is at the end of June. So we're 3 months down the line. So it's this report needed to go to corporate board first and through the governance framework before it comes to G&E. So yeah, it was at that point in time. Things have obviously moved on since then.
So I take it, Julie, the next report's actually ready then?
No, because we're not at the end of September yet.
Yeah, but
So-
the next one will be for Q2, won't it? So,
Yeah. So I'll be doing that report in the next month. Yeah.
So we're talking fiscal or calendar year then?
It's fiscal year, financial year.
Okay, thanks. That's clears it up there. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Jones next.
Thank you. Julie, just a question of terminology and understanding, really. Your Appendix B, which talks about the current audits, has a column entitled Current Position of the Work, which I presume is the stage at which you're at in your audit cycle for each of those line items. As I was reading it, it seemed obvious, and then I realised I wasn't quite sure what those different those different terms actually meant in terms of where you were. Draft report issued is obvious, but things like data matches, testing, background, ready for review, I wasn't quite sure how your process cycled through the various stages. I just wondered if you could explain that.
Yeah. The one you've mentioned about the data matching are being reviewed, that is a one-off. That is just a one-off because of the nature of the work to do the National Fraud Initiative. We get systems of data matching reports coming back, and that is where we're reviewing these different reports. So that one's slightly different. The main audit work, there are a number of key stages. There's the background, which is us reviewing the area, what risks are involved, what controls do we think needs to be in place, and that's drafting the terms of reference. That's all in background. The testing is where we've agreed the scope of the audit and we have agreed what evidence and what we need to review, and the testing is actually undertaking that work, and that's the large proportion of the audit work, is undertaking that testing, getting the evidence and the assurance. And then from that, once the auditor has got to that stage, every bit of work has to be reviewed, independently reviewed, quality controlled, and that's where it's then ready for review. And that's where I get involved to do that quality control, look at the evidence and make sure I agree with the auditor, what they've looked at and the opinions they've come to. And then after that, it goes on to drafting the report and issuing a draft report for client consultation. And then it's finalised. So there's a few different key stages.
Great, thank you. It becomes a lot more obvious when you explain it, so that's very clear. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Rolls again.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned about school visits being postponed or cancelled due to COVID, and then prioritising those schools in the first quarter of this current year. A couple of questions. Is there still a backlog, or are we now completely up to date? Secondly, do you envisage any other issues? Obviously, we're not fully out of COVID, so are there controls in place to manage that if we're in the same situation later this year? Thank you.
The first part of the question, we had, I think, 15 school visits scheduled in, and we've only got 2 remaining, so we're nearly up to date with those. So yeah, there's a lot of effort concentrated on to get those out of the way. When you mention about, am I expecting or thinking that there could be other issues related to COVID, do you mean in relation to the schools or generally? Sorry.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, if that's okay to Chair to comment. I guess what I'm getting at is, do we have some form of contingency if we have controls in place, again, both in schools and potentially, you know, more generally? I guess, have we thought about that, or are we just going to wait and see?
I'm sorry, I'm still not. Do you mean to undertake the audit work or controls for what? Sorry.
So if there's COVID restrictions that come into force later this year, if you know, certain countries have gone back into COVID restrictions, do we have contingencies around how we would manage that, or is it a question of we would just have a backlog and then work our way through it like we've done in this case? Or is there any learnings from it, I guess, in terms of managing that?
Oh, okay. From the point of view, the schools are different because they're on-site visits. We have to actually physically visit the school. Whilst a lot of the other audits, the corporate audits, we don't. It's a lot of it's electronic information. So as part of the lockdowns, we haven't had a significant impact on being able to do the work, obtain the evidence, because a lot of it is electronic. What we have had an issue with, and that could be ongoing, is services not being able to support the audits because they've been prioritising and having to deal with the COVID response. So that is the only thing that I could see could be an issue, not as actually undertaking the work if the service can accommodate it.
Okay, Councillor Jones, is that an old hand or is that a new one? Okay, I've got Parish Councillor Southgate next.
Hello, good evening. Could I just understand Appendix C, the anti-fraud work plan? There seems to be a number of boxes with no update on. Is the intention of starting those later in the year, or is that just that there's no work intended? I guess the other thing from an understanding of this perspective, it's very hard to gain whether this is just one study in each area or there are multiple things going on, because there are no dimensions on this particular this table. Is this a major undertaking or a minor one? So in form of sort of trying to be informed and understanding, is this a big bit of work we're doing? The table doesn't seem to tell me very much as currently configured.
The Appendix C has been lifted off the agreed audit plan. And these are areas that are on the audit plan and the way I lay out the actual audit plan work. And there it gives you a risk assessment, whether it's low, moderate or whatever. So this is just lifted off there because these are specific bits of anti-fraud work. And I'm required to be able to put together a specific anti-fraud plan, but it is actually linked into the main audit plan where it shows the number of days we're going to spend on it, the complexity of the area and the risk assessment. So that's in the plan that's gone previously to committee. So hopefully that should give you the context to the work, but I appreciate on an update that's not there, but it is in the agreed plan.
Okay. I can't see any further hands in the room or on Zoom, and I haven't really got anything that I want to add to that. So as the recommendation as set on page 11 is to note the report only, there's no need to vote on the item. So we'll move on to item 6, Licensing Act 2003 and Gambling Act 2005 delegations. I think we've got Moira Fraser to introduce this report.
I think Sean Murphy's going to be introducing it.
Okay, sorry, I had you on my briefing here, but yeah, Sean, if you want to take us through it.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. If I could start actually by just updating really on the report, because I noticed actually when I just before I came into the meeting that actually the report is before the committee tonight is written in terms of recommendations as recommendations for the licensing committee, where ultimately the report will end up. So effectively what the committee is being asked to do today is not to approve the delegations. That's a matter for the licensing committee in due course to consider, but to consider the proposals for the delegations that are going to be put before the licensing committee. So if I could just really put that forward in terms of clarification. Just moving on to the report, obviously this committee normally considers matters of constitution. Now, the situation with relation to the Licensing Act 2003 and the Gambling Act 2005 is slightly different to other matters, basically, which come before the committee in terms of scheme of delegation. And the reason being is that both of those pieces of legislation effectively develop the concept of the licensing authority in the form of the committee itself. Now, what the report basically does is set out the legal basis for which the licensing committee, rather than full council, would determine the delegations in respect of those two pieces of legislation, both to officers and to subcommittees of the licensing committee. So what's before you today basically is an updated or a proposal for updated scheme of delegations for both the Licensing Act 2003, which obviously covers regulated activities such as entertainment and the sale of alcohol, and for the Gambling Act 2005, which covers premise licenses for gambling activities that are licensed by the council. So effectively, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the reason why it's before you today. They are proposed schemes delegations due to go to licensing, and we wanted to follow the same route as we would for any proposed schemes of delegations. Basically, the council was due to consider in due course.
Thanks, Sean. I've got Councillor Rolls first.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So am I basically you saying that it would eventually come to full council? So whatever the licensing committee recommends based on this scheme of delegation, that full council would have final sort of sign off or not? It would just go through under the licensing committee.
So the delegations from the licensing committee basically would just go to licensing committee. So they're the items which are either delegations to the subcommittee or to the officers. So effectively columns 2 or 3 and 4, I suppose, of the report. There are some matters which are reserved anyway to full council, in particular the sign off of the policies under both acts. The Licensing Act policy comes to full council, and the Gambling Act policy, which is currently going through the process of consultation, will ultimately come to full council as well for sign off. But no, it is a matter for the licensing committee to approve delegations to subcommittees and officers.
Okay, I've got Councillor Abbs next.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just clarification for me, really, having kind of zipped through the document. Page 43, section 132A, bracket 12. It's highlighted in yellow, but I don't know why, and I can't find an explanation as to why. And then the following page 44, there's 2 blocks marked in green, but I don't know why. Does anybody know why?
I'm not sure. I mean, I've got a black and white copy in front of me,
right.
so someone wants to respond to that.
Yeah, it's the printed pages. Just a clarification. It's a slightly different to the PDF page.
I can explain that, Councillor Abbs. Actually, it's nothing of significance. Those were areas that basically I was asking officers in the team to seek clarification on. And obviously, basically, before the report got put into the pack, obviously the highlighting hasn't been taken off. Okay. So apologies for that. So it was basically I had asked officers check those pieces with the advisors that we had.
So that's good. I had the same question. So.
Oh, okay, good.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I can't see any more hands virtually or in the room. So obviously, Sean, you gave us that little explanation about the report at the beginning.
Yeah.
Are the 2 recommendations that we have to approve, and are they still valid?
No. So Chair, if I may propose it. So at 2.1, I would propose that the Governance and Ethics Committee note the proposed delegations, basically which are going to be considered by the Licensing Committee. And Sarah can probably advise, but I think 2.2, Sarah, in my view, would be a matter for the decision of the Licensing Committee, and then you would manage that from that point onwards. Would that be the case?
Yes. So I think, Chairman, I would be happy for the recommendation to be amended so that if Governance and Ethics Committee are content that these are appropriate recommendations and that there is certainly nothing irregular, that they in effect recommend them to the Licensing Committee to consider, in the same way that Governance and Ethics would recommend proposed changes to the Constitution to Council. So I think it is to recognise really that the decision in relation to paragraphs 2.1 and 2.2 are reserved to Licensing Committee.
So the recommendation, Sarah, at 2.1 would be to recommend the proposed delegations to the Licensing Committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then 2.2?
That would be a firm matter for the Licensing Committee when that time comes.
So we just ignore 2.2 and
yeah, strike 2.2 would be my view.
That's fine. So before we move on to Councillor, then I'll see you got your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to propose the vice officer.
Okay, great. And someone else in the room want to second that? Councillor Abbs. So everyone happy with that? Raise their hand.
That's carried.
Okay, great. So following that, that's the conclusion of our business for tonight. Thanks to everyone for attending, both virtually and in the room. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 15th of November. I'd request that members remain seated until the host has confirmed the meeting is no longer being live streamed.